All right, I think we are recording. Yes, time is moving. Sorry for all of you who cannot make it today. I have handed out papers. I will, for those of you who are missing class today, I will hand them out next week. I'll bring them next week. Our art of the week is, I feel like you guys are just way far away from me, is the Discobulus or Discus Thrower. This is a very, very famous piece of art. If you Google Discus Thrower, Discobulus from home, you can see this. You've probably seen it before. I will lay it out on the table. You can look at it later. You can come grab it if you want to. But this is not, unfortunately, the Greek original. We don't have it anymore. This is a Roman copy. But we know about the original. We even know that the name of the artist was Myron, because it was written about. And we know this is the statue they were talking about. It was originally in bronze. Remember our guy who was Zeus / Poseidon with the, depending on whether it was a thunderbolt or a trident that he was getting ready to throw? This was also, and our charioteer from Delphi, this was also in bronze. But the Romans, I know you guys know, when they took over Greece, they took over their art and literature and gods. They just wholesale, you like that, we will take that. Thank you very much. And they started making copies of Greek art. This is a Roman copy. The original was 450 BC. So, while Sophocles was writing his plays, this statue was made, the original. However, the Romans got a hold of it, and I do not know to what era, what time of the empire this belongs. But this one's in marble, you can tell. He's got, I don't know if you guys can see, behind him there's a stump, or he's leaning against a post. You can see something kind of behind there. No, so he's got one leg here and one leg here, and then there's behind here. Right. Okay, I'm sorry, you guys, but I'm leaving you. I'll be back. Yeah, it's for stability of the statue, because in the bronze they didn't need that. So you'll see a lot of these Roman copies, and they have a tree stump or something conveniently there. It wasn't in the original. They just needed it for the stability of the marble. Yes. The amazing thing about this here, can you guys see the amazing thing I love about this, I'm not a great art historian sort of person. Let me come here again. But the cool thing about this is the way it's arranged. First of all, he's in amazing shape. All right. And by that, I mean, I'm admiring, as the Greeks would have, somebody who's beautiful in body, but also the fact that the artist has brought out the very veins in his biceps, straining. That's amazing to me. The ribs and all the detail, and also the fact that if you've done any art training at all, or just if you think about it, it's one thing to draw a person who's just straight, symmetrical, but it's another thing, when they're to the side a little bit. But it's a way other thing when they're, like contorted all different ways. It does things to the proportions of your limbs. It does things to your muscle structure. It's crazy that they can reconstruct that. But here's the coolest thing. You look at it, and do you see how his arms make a semicircle? And then on the other side, your eyes are kind of drawn here, the curve of his body here. He's got two opposite curves. And I was reading about this statue, and they compared it. It's like a drawn bow. His body, the whole thing is like a drawn bow at the moment when he's getting ready to let her rip, right? He's just getting ready to fling it. That bow is just ready to let go. It's a very, very wonderful statue. The Greeks were amazing artists. It is interesting to me that we read the Iliad and the Odyssey, but then basically everything else we're going to read this year, almost everything else we're going to read about is in a 70, 75-year time period. All the art we're going to look at, all the plays, Aristotle, Plato. Aristotle's a little later, but the Plato that we're going to read. I don't know what happens in the world that suddenly there's this burst of creativity, like Renaissance. How can Da Vinci and Michelangelo live at the same time? How is it just to the world that they shouldn't they be spaced out a little bit so more than one generation can enjoy them? It's amazing. I don't know. I mean, this must be in God's plan somehow that there's these bursts of amazing creativity. Anyway, one of them was this century that we're spending time in this year. That's why we're spending a whole school year basically in one century, almost, because it's so rich. Anyway, that is my pep talk about ancient Greece. Thank you for listening. I am supposed to be collecting a summa from you. So my notes say, which I need to start consulting because you guys leave and then I look at my notes and find out I have not done anything. Do you ladies have? It's okay. There's no judgment. What is it? What is that? Is it a gym? They call it the judgment-free zone, like Planet Fitness. Like this is a judgment-free zone. Yes. Oh, yes.
Would you want me to? Yeah, go ahead.
Yeah. So, thank you, Ethan. So I asked Ethan to ask me about semicolons because I push semicolons on you sometimes, and then maybe I don't explain their use well, and it's a tricky thing that a lot of adults abuse. So let me find. I'm trying to find one that I changed. Okay. Oh, you know what? I know what it is, Ethan. I remember now. I'm sorry. I read a lot of papers throughout the week, and then I forget. I feel like it makes you feel like I don't care about you. Like, she can't remember my paper. Okay, so no, you weren't abusing semicolons. You weren't. So just so that everybody knows, a semicolon can only happen when we have a complete sentence on both sides of it. All right, which actually Ethan did. But here, may I read? Are you willing to be outed? Okay, and I think Ethan knows already what I mean. I am going to do this every time Ethan puts a semicolon. All right, this means semicolon. Despite the let's start over. Despite the evil, corrupt, sinful, and wickedly not moral steps Clytemnestra took to slaughter her husband, it was over. Orestes murdered his own mother. He murdered the one who bore him without any thought. Besides, there are the other safer ways of fulfilling a revengeful murder plot. Okay, do you see what I'm driving at? All right, this is the next sentence. I love it. But I got to tell you, Ethan, every single one of those is a complete sentence. I can't technically tell you you're wrong. It was dramatic. If Orestes would have put an ounce of thought into resorting to violence, he would remember that a family's already cursed. Orestes is foolish. Orestes must fix this mess if he wants to heal. So I'm just going to say, and I could go on, but I will not. I think we get the message. So what I would advise, I don't know that there's a grammatical rule in a book somewhere that says this, but I would advise only using one semicolon in a sentence and then beginning a new sentence. And here's why. The dramatic effect of a semicolon is the fact that, remember when we did antithesis? We're actually going to add antithesis. You guys are behind 2 elocution elements because I keep giving you papers and forgetting to look at my notes and telling you to add something. in case you wondered, like, what happened to the elocution? So Mrs. Ferguson never looks at her notes. And then you leave. Antithesis that brings two dissimilar things together. So semicolons are really good at that. Or two thoughts that are related. It doesn't have to be dissimilar things. Summer is hot, semicolon. Winter is cold. That's a lame sentence. But we see the antithesis, the two opposite things. Or Orestes wanted to obey Apollo, semicolon. However, comma, he did it at the cost of his own moral fiber and peace of mind. All right, so that brings those two thoughts together. So it's hard to have a string of things that are all related to each other. Does that make sense? So we pick the two things that we think are most related to each other, that we want to, the two ideas that we want to set against each other, and just put those in a sentence, and then maybe start a new sentence for the next one. Now, probably it's not the greatest writing to have a whole series of, you know, sentence with a semicolon, sentence with a semicolon, sentence with a semicolon. Eventually, you might want to break that up with using just and, or but, or a conjunction to join them that makes more sense, because just like anything, if we do something for dramatic effect and we do it too much, it loses its effect, doesn't it? And then your reader starts to just blank out. I have a student, she's not here this week, or she'll be watching this, you know who you are, who is in love with exclamation points. And she's been my student since she was maybe in 3rd or 4th grade. You know, now she's in high school. This is my 8th year I've been doing this. And so we've been working, and so I tease her roundly about her exclamation points, but it's the same problem, isn't it? If everything is an exclamation, nothing is. It's like the Incredibles. If everyone's whatever, no one is. If everyone's super, then no one is super, yes. See, this is my philosophy. I go to that movie a lot for my philosophy. Oh, was there another comment?
The one that you said, I questioned you were talking about proof
Oh.
spontaneous. So I was looking more as he didn't put enough thought into it, instead of he shouldn't have, he should have neither put no thought into something and too much thought.
Okay. Do you mind if I read that paragraph again? And just because I challenge, just because I say your proof doesn't convince me, that doesn't mean you can't challenge it back. Say, well, I think it does, and here's why. I'm very open to that. I see. So Ethan, see if I'm right. You're arguing that if he had thought about it more, he wouldn't have done it? Is that what you're saying?
It was foolish for him to do it without thinking about it at all, because he could
That's okay. Okay. I think perhaps that link in your reasoning, your logic chain might have been missing, because you say, you know, he shouldn't have done it because it was spontaneous, he put no thought into it, and then you go on, but, you know, if he'd put a thought, okay, if Orestes would have put an ounce of thought into resorting to violence, he would remember that the family is already cursed, semicolon, Orestes is foolish, semicolon, Orestes must fix his mess. Okay, so, okay, I concur. I see that. My question for Ethan was, he seemed to be arguing that he shouldn't have done it because it was too spontaneous. And then my question back for him is, well, does spontaneous equal wrong and well thought out equal right? And I thought he was arguing that he should have thought about it more and then killed her. Then he still might have killed her. But I see. Maybe the fact that I didn't catch it, first of all, you might have been, I try not to read more than 3 or 4 papers at a time, but you might have been the 4th one and my brain might have been tired. Or it might not have been as obvious. Sometimes we argue something and we know exactly what our argument is in our own heads. I know exactly what I'm saying, and why can you not see it? If I just had a cord to plug you to my brain, you could see that I'm perfectly right. But I don't have the cord to attach to your brain, so we have to be sometimes painfully explicit about what we're arguing. And it feels like I'm talking to a kindergartner here that I'm explaining, but it doesn't feel like that to the other person, because they don't see. All the time I make comments to my husband, you know, something will happen, and of course my brain train goes on a little voyage from station to station very rapidly, and then I answer with something just 5 seconds later that seems very randomly unrelated. And often, for whatever reason, to his annoyance, I'm sure, I feel obligated to take him on the journey with me to the stations and visit the stations. Well, this made me think of that, and this made me think of that, and then I said this. And they are related in my head, but to the untrained observer, they're not related. So when we write our proofs, don't be afraid. If I feel like you are going on and on too much, I will tell you. Do you know what I mean? But probably if we're going to err one side or the other, if we want to convince someone of something, giving them more information than they need is better than giving them less information than they need to follow your argument. Does that make sense? Okay, thank you. Okay, so I had to read Oedipus at Colonus and Antigone. I waste all that time showing you my wonderful medic bag, and suddenly it's late. What? Oedipus. Oedipus.
I accidentally, in my paper, and I put some asterisks in there, but I accidentally, like, halfway through my paper, like, I just realized, like, I switched the P to D.
Oh, he's Epidus. Epidus. I wonder what that means in Greek. If Oedipus means small, I don't know enough Greek. Epidus. We'll have to find out. Oedipus.
Writing my paper, I actually wrote, "Who is to blame for Orestes' fate?" I'm like, no, wrong.
I did that yesterday in class. I called him Orestes, just like I kept calling Telemachus. I kept calling Orestes Telemachus. Oh, maybe that was only on Tuesday. I kept calling him Telemachus. Okay, so I want to go through the questions for Oedipus at Colonus pretty fast and then spend more time on Antigone. But Gabby, what did you want to say? Yes. Pylades. Pisistratus and Telemachus. Yeah, Nestor's son. Yes. Okay, well, so Gabby's question, because I don't think it came over on the video, is, you know, she was reading up on the Trojan War and she ran into the scholars saying that basically Achilles and Patroclus were lovers, had a homosexual relationship, and that maybe Telemachus and Pisistratus did. So, and I kind of avoided this whole subject with you guys because, you know, on one hand, we're supposed to know what evil is, but on the other side, it says, you know, they do such things as it is shameful even to speak of, you know, and we just don't need to dwell on it. But homosexuality was sort of institutionalized by ancient Greece. This is the downside of their culture. And it wasn't that it's not like when we think of it today, people say, I just have that tendency or whatever. It was a phase. And so it was almost a social institution that older men would take on a younger boy. I know, I'm sorry. See, this is why, but Gabby brought, and I'm not, like, I'm just gonna tell you, like Mrs. Ferguson just tells the truth. I'm sorry, some things I just keep to myself, but if it comes up, I'm gonna say it. And they would you know, have a sexual relationship, but it would be more than that. It would be like a mentor relationship, and he would watch over him to make sure he hung out with the right people, and his education was good and that sort of thing. I know, but then they would go on and they would marry and they would have normal lives. There's very little indication that it was a lifelong thing for most of them. So, I know. I'm sorry to. I'm sorry. Thanks so much, Gabby. No, I'm teasing you. I'm teasing you. If you go very far into reading about ancient Greece at all, you're going to run into this. And so, actually, there's some dialogues by Plato that there might be one that we're reading where they say something about, you know, and he was attracted to this beautiful boy. Like, oh, really? Or there were two older men who were sort of fighting for the attentions of a beautiful young boy. So, that said, because the Iliad and the Odyssey are products of Greek literature, they tend to impose that institution on something that was written 400 or 500 years earlier. So we're going to say at the most that there's 400 years between Plato and Homer. We don't know, but let's just go with some accepted probable figures. 400 years is a long time, and there's no hint that that sort of institution was operating in Homeric Greece, that they were doing that sort of thing. Also, as I pointed out, the institution in classical Greece was almost always older man, younger protege that you're mentoring, and that's part of the relationship. Patroclus and Achilles are peers. They grew up together. They would not fit the profile, even for that. So here, this gets teased about a lot, and people who refute it or try to argue against it get teased. I don't think there was anything going on between Achilles and Patroclus except a deep friendship. And I think the fact that we read that into, some people read that back into that text, says something about the fact that we don't understand what friendship is, and that men in our society tend not to have friendships like that. Women tend to have them more, but all modern Americans, no, many, not all, because I know people who have deep friendships, we don't understand what friendship means. Where you share your heart and soul with someone and it rips your guts out when something happens to them. That we weep with those who weep, we rejoice with those who rejoice. That the Romans called a friend another self. And we don't know what that looks like, and we're not comfortable with men having it. And I could go on, we could spend the whole rest of our time exploring why American, ideas of men discourage close friendships between men without it seeming like something is going on, other than, I love you and you're my friend. Like Roland and, we haven't done the medieval year with you guys yet. Get the song of Roland. I'll have to wait a couple of years. That is my opinion. That in those texts, in Homer's texts, there's no evidence of anything like that. In Achilles' shelter, they both sleep with their individual women, Briseis and whoever Patroclus has got. I'm not making a comment on their sexual mores, like that's just what they did. But I don't believe that in Homer for a minute. But in classical Greece, oh yeah. But not what we think of as being homosexuality. It was just this mentorship thing. Socrates, we're going to read about a guy named Alcibiades, and he was young, flashy, hard drinking and partying, and apparently good looking, and everybody loved Alcibiades, including Socrates. And they hint about, and there's one Plato's dialogue called the Symposium, and they're having a symposium is a drinking party, and you drink a lot, and then you expound on philosophical subjects, whatever. And so there's what is love? That's the topic of this symposium. And Alcibiades comes in, and they're teasing Socrates because Alcibiades was kind of buddying up to Socrates, like, oh, you can be my mentor, you can be my, and Socrates wasn't into it because he's like, no, I'm not interested in your body, I'm interested in your mind. Like, but he also says things in the dialogues that make you think he's interested in his body. And it was a thing. And so I'm sorry that it was a thing. The Romans thought it was disgusting. The Romans, very little homosexuality in Rome, as far as we can tell. And they just really thought, oh, those Greeks are really smart, but they're disgusting. You're welcome. For either enlightening you or ruining your day, or both. But I'm glad you asked, because I've thought about it too. I thought, we're not really reading anything where it comes up, but if you go online, if you read other books, they're just gonna get hit with it. You're gonna get homosexuality in ancient Greece, and then you're gonna get people insinuating things about Achilles, and which I just don't see as there, personally. Okay, we're going to just rip through the questions at Oedipus at Colonus. Did anybody have any trouble understanding this play? It's pretty straightforward. So, where does Oedipus, what? Antigone's pretty straightforward too. Yeah, okay, well, we're going to spend more time there. Okay, so at the beginning of the play, whose sacred ground does Oedipus end up on? The Eumenides, the Furies, the ones who chase you if you kill your family members. He killed his dad. And indirectly, his mom, one could argue. But they've been tamed, right? They're now the Eumenides, they're the kindly ones. They've been adopted into Athens as a part of the Athenian, pantheon, and their blessed households or whatever. He shows up there, and how does Oedipus react? Yes, he wants to know, okay, what do I do? But he also says this. All right, I don't want to spend a lot of time looking for stuff, but okay, when the god cried out, okay, I'm on line 110 of Oedipus at Colonus. 110. I was going to say 109. Actually, I'm more like 106. When the gods cried out those lifelong prophecies of doom, he spoke of this as well, my promised rest after hard years weathered. I will reach my goal, he said, my haven, where I find the grounds of the awesome goddesses and make their home my home. The awesome goddesses are the Eumenides, the Furies. He, apparently, unbeknownst to us, and of course, remember Sophocles wrote these plays at different times, so he's free to tweak the plot. You know what I mean? There doesn't have to be continuity because they weren't presented together. In this version, Oedipus got another prophecy as well. You're going to suffer and all this bad stuff's going to happen to you, but someday you're going to come to the grove of the awesome goddesses, and there you will find your rest. We also learn in this play he got some other news from the gods. Wherever he dies, right? I'm sorry, is that the next question? Yes, why does he want to stay here? He wants to bless them. This is outside of Athens. He says, there I will round the last turn in the torment of my life. A blessing to the hosts I live among. Disaster to those who sent me, drove me out. Poor Oedipus, blind, suffering Oedipus, at the end of his life, now gets to be the bearer of blessing. And interestingly, starts becoming a prophet. At the end of the play, I'm going to skip around a little bit. At the end of the play, when his sons come, and his one son comes, Polynices, he lets rip this prophecy about how his sons are both going to die. And his son's like, well, his sister says, don't do it, don't do it. Well, I'm going to do it anyway. That's just the way it is. Too late to turn back now. In other words, do you notice? Oedipus is now a blind prophet. Oedipus is Tiresias. Isn't that kind of strange that his life has come full circle? And now he's the blind guy wandering around giving prophecies to other people. And he's the one sometimes telling people what they don't want to hear, but also bringing blessings to the ones who hear and the ones who have him. Theseus is a nice guy in this play, isn't he? Theseus is just, oh, I'm sorry, stranger, what do you need? What do you want? Oh, you're that one? Well, you know what? Was it your fault, was it? I know a lot of people don't want to hang out with you because of the stuff that happened. But Athens welcomes you. Athens takes in the downtrodden. What's the audience for this play when it's first performed? Athens. Yay for us. We're Athens. We take in the downtrodden. We're merciful and generous, and we receive blessing because we're like that. Yeah, we're going to talk about that next week. Let's just wait till next week to talk about that. What news does Ismene bring about the situation in Thebes? Go, you, Alex.
He says that the brothers bonding is unbroken.
Oh, not yet. This is before they fight. Yeah.
Her brothers or whatever, his sons are like trying to figure out all that crazy stuff.
Yes.
And then they're like, kill him, but
Yes. Yes. So she brings two new, your brothers. There's civil war in Thebes because Eteocles took over the throne and Polynices wants it. And he has gone, you talked about last week, he's gone to 7 other towns. Went to Argos and married the king's daughter. So Argos is on board. And then he went to other places, yes.
is this Oedipus, thank you, at Colonus?
Yes.
Oh, I'm on the wrong play.
Oh, no, he was looking at the line numbers, I think, and he couldn't, I wasn't saying what his book said because he was in another play, which is fine. Ismene also says that look out, because they have gotten a memo also from the gods that whoever has possession of you and your body will be blessed and will be victorious. So guess what? I think they're headed this way. They're going to want to persuade you to come home, not because they want you. They just want to use you. They don't want you to come back into town. They want to put you outside the walls as close to town as you can possibly be without corrupting the town. Just so they can use your powers of blessing. Make sense? In other words, he's been wandering around, we don't know how many years. And his brothers didn't, gave him squat help. Right? Didn't do anything for him. His daughters have cared for him. But now they want him when he's useful. So I guess I just blew the next one out of the water. Why do Creon and Polynices both come to Oedipus? Not to kill him, to take him, right, to take him and use him to the point where Creon is even willing to kidnap his daughters, his nieces / great nieces, whatever, they're nieces of some sort, of more than one sort. And Creon is not a nice guy in this play. Creon is sort of the guy that Oedipus thinks he is in the first play, out for himself and trying to take over. Creon, here, let me find the place. Hang on. This is what happens when I jump around. Hang on, be patient, I'm so sorry. I wanted to read this part because it's good. Oh, okay. Now, I got excited. Oh no, I'm sorry, it was in the other, I'm looking for something that's in Antigone. Sorry. In this version, I just want to touch on this too. In this version, Oedipus says this about his past. How could you call me guilty? How by nature? I was attacked. I struck in self-defense. In this version, Laius and his entourage are getting ready to kill Oedipus.
Wait, what? You just killed this random guy that is in the road? Wait, who is?
When Oedipus met his dad at the crossroad, the place where three roads meet, in the first play, it was, oh, they were pushing me off the road and he was going to whack me with a stick or something and I killed them all. In this play, he says it was self-defense. Yes. I think this is actually a plot twist. I think in this one, a plot shift. Shift is what I meant. Thank you. That in this version, remember, these stories have multiple versions. And if you're writing plays, you can take whatever version suits you at the time. It makes you feel a little more sorry for Oedipus, doesn't it? If he struck out in complete self-defense and killed his dad, rather than he got angry and slaughtered a whole group of people because they pushed him off the road.
That's what the first play was.
Oh.
That's what Oedipus was. That Oedipus.
Oh, that's the impression you got at the first one?
Oedipus at Colonus, it was one of the stuff.
Yes, yes.
That in mind, he decided.
Oh, just a second. Let me see if there's anything. I want to move on to Antigone because we're running short on time. Oh, I want to read this section, and then we'll answer the last question. We'll move on to Antigone for the rest of the time. I am on line 563, maybe, of Oedipus at Colonus. Let me set the quote up, the passage up. Oedipus has invaded a sacred precinct. And so there is something that's going to have to be done to atone for that. And it involves going up into the hillside and getting a bowl that's there and pouring out libations and saying words. And obviously Oedipus is blind and he can't do it himself. And he wants to know, well, can my daughter was here too, can one person go for both of us? You know, can I send my daughter because I'm blind? Oedipus says, I'm going to start at line 560. I cannot go myself, not in this condition, strength gone, a double share of pain. One of you go and carry out these rites. One soul is enough, I know, to pay the debt for thousands, if one will go to the gods in all good faith. One soul is enough, I know, to pay the debt for thousands, if one will go to the gods in all good faith. This really struck me as like the high priest Caiaphas saying, it is good that one man die. It is better that one man die than that all the people should perish, and had no idea he was speaking prophecy because he just wanted to get rid of Jesus. Yes. It strikes me as amazing that the pagan people know and want and need the same things. They, with no access to the Old Testament. Although the church fathers often argue that Plato got a lot of his ideas from exposure to the Old Testament. Because when we read some Plato, like he's got some pretty, Socrates, but he puts him in the mouth of Socrates, but Plato. I mean, I'm not saying Plato is a Christian. I'm saying there are some hauntingly biblical ideas that we find in Plato. And like, well, how did he come up with this? So, and it could be just longing for it. So it has been argued, and I just recently saw a new book come out, and it's a study of the possibility of Plato's exposure to Old Testament ideas. Be that as it may, all people know we gotta have a Savior. And somehow they know it's tied up with suffering. You know, in that first, it was in Agamemnon, the chorus kept saying, we must suffer into truth. That suffering leads to truth somehow. And Oedipus has suffered his whole life. From his perspective, really not earned in any way, especially if it was self-defense and he was just saving his own life. He acted in complete ignorance. But now he speaks the words that one soul can basically atone for thousands. And he's about to leave his body in Athens, where it will be a protection and a security there, where his one person who goes to the gods in good faith, that'll be him, is going to preserve thousands from war and calamity. And this, I feel like, should astound all of us. When St. Paul says that there's I'm paraphrasing now, but that there's a knowledge of the truths inscribed on the tablets of men's hearts, that the knowledge of what is true is there so that men are without excuse. It really is true. So the boys that I'm reading books with, we're reading The Abolition of Man. We're talking about the abolition of man this afternoon. And C.S. Lewis talks about what he calls the Tao, which is basically natural law. It's the Buddhist term for natural law. The things we all accept are true. Kindness to others is a good thing. There's no culture in the world that thinks being mean to people is a good thing. There's things that all people naturally agree on. But there are also natural longings that all people seem to have. It's a blow me away line, you know, that one soul. Quote it right. I'll have to look it up in the Greek. One soul is enough, I know, to pay the debt for thousands, if one will go to the gods in all good faith. The story of Oedipus at the end of his life ends up being one of redemption and blessing and grace, even though terrible suffering. And prophecy. And he becomes that prophet at the end. And then last question. What request does Polynices make of his sisters? We'll say it, Ethan. Mm-hmm. Bury me. Oh, no, I don't buy it either. Yeah, no, Oedipus doesn't mince words, does he? Like, you jerk. You are a crummy son. What is... Okay, Ethan wants to do a dramatic reading.
You die and be damned. I sit on you, out. Your father cuts you off, corruption, scum of the earth, out. And pack these curses that fall upon your head. Never to leave your mother country with your spear. Never return to Argos, great you with Phil. Die. Die like a bone blood brother's hand. Die. Killing the very man who drove you out. So I curse your life out. I fall on the dark depths of
Tartarus, yes.
Brittany Cave, where all our fathers lie, holy home, or alien home, whichever.
Yeah.
I cry to the great goddess of this film. I cry to the great god of war, who planned the terrible hatred of hearts. Go, all my curses, feathering hatred. Go and herald them out, every man in you, and all your loyal comrades under hearts. Cry out that Oedipus has these last rites, these royal rites of birth to the This is pretty intense.
It's pretty intense.
Dang, that's what you say to someone.
Yeah. So, I've told you this before, we've talked about this. Even for us, we don't believe in throwing bodies out. We don't just throw bodies out in the street for dogs to eat them. We treat our dead bodies ceremoniously, even people who are not Christians. we treat them with respect, right? Because it's just what you do. In ancient Greece, they also, not having a reason, not seeing a creature made in the image of God whose body is eventually destined for resurrection, but they still treated them with respect, largely because, your soul, your shade doesn't go across the river Styx unless you're buried. Think of Odyssey and the times when somebody, hey, why don't you bury me because I can't go across yet. But also, I think this is another of those Tao things that C.S. Lewis was talking about in The Abolition of Man, that we somehow know that there's, you honor people by caring for their bodies, and you dishonor them by abusing their bodies. Remember in Herodotus where Pausanias, they said, we'll just cut off Mardonius's head, and put it on a stake, because they did that to Leonidas after Thermopylae. Like, yeah, no, barbarians do that. Greeks don't do that. So the whole abuse, this is why Achilles dragging Hector's body around is just so horrible. And why people fought like cats and dogs to drag your friend's body out of the fighting and bring them back, even after their armor was stripped off. You don't leave your loved ones or your comrades out for the birds and the dogs, right? So, with that said, what has Creon forbidden at the beginning of Antigone, and what's the punishment? Yeah. It's capital punishment, it's capital offense, to bury Polynices. Polynices is the one who attacked Thebes. You got two brothers. One of them, depending on the version, had taken over the throne, and one of them was attacking to get it back. So Creon sees one of them as the defender of Thebes, and one as an attacker of his kin and his home. We don't bury him. We'll have you executed if you bury him. No honor, no free passage into Hades or any of that. No. You will leave him there, and the dogs and the birds will get in. I know. And the second question, I asked you, why does Antigone disobey? Oh, go ahead.
She hears the dogs who say, you must bury me. She hears the dogs more than she hears the men.
This is we must obey God rather than men, right? She also says this. I like this argument too. This is in Antigone, line 86, starting at line 86. And even if I die in the act, that death will be a glory. I will lie with the one I love and loved by him, an outrage sacred to the gods. I have longer to please the dead than please the living here. In the kingdom down below, I'll lie forever. I'm going to live with my brother in the underworld forever. And when I go and show up, I want to have done right by him. I have a short time to please Creon and human beings. I have a long time to live with the dead in the next world. I'm going to please my brother, because that's a long-term arrangement. I think it's kind of a cool argument. And it's a very, we could tweak that and make that a very Christian argument. Why? Because eternity is a lot longer than our life on earth, right? That's why we please God. That's why we do what he wants and not what an earthly ruler wants, unless the earthly ruler, we should obey our earthly rulers, unless they tell you to break God's commands. But yes, exactly. But we're talking a blip time span of the longest life on earth compared to eternity. There's no contest. Yes. Like the dew that dries by noontime. That's what we ought not. This is a very, very cheerful class, isn't it? Uplifting for all of us. It's like we have the guy like Xerxes, remember the Athenians. They say that the Persian kings also would have sometimes somebody, remember you are mortal, remember you must die. They would have somebody, great kings and potentates of the earth sometimes have someone to remind them, you're not a god, you're not immortal. Okay, all right, let me see. I'm going to read this quote from Creon. This is between 200 and 205. And it gives us some insight into Creon's character and motivation. I'm actually going to start up somewhere between 195 and 200. As I see it, whoever assumes the awesome task of setting the city's course, and refuses to adopt the soundest policies, but fearing someone keeps his lips locked tight, he's utterly worthless. So I rate him now, I always have. And whoever places a friend above the good of his own country, he is nothing. I have no use for him. What is top number one on Creon's hit list? The good of my country. I do everything for the good of my country. I break all other rules for the good of my country. You see how you slide into some sticky territory in that it's good to do things for the good of your country. I want to do everything I do for the good of my country, and now that's the only thing that matters. Relationships, what the gods want. It's a very slippery path to, I want to do this, to, this is the only thing that matters and I can break all other rules to do it. People tend to go down that path easily, and Creon, I think, does. He's sort of, okay, the gods aside, he's got a good point, and his heart's in the right place, his heart is not in the right place, but he wants to honor the one who defends his country and punish the one who attacks his country. Okay, Creon, we get that. But now this is your only value. This is your only goal. So it's like, we don't care that the gods frown on this. We don't care that it's my own niece who's going to be executed, also engaged to my son, which comes out in this play. And that was okay. Like, cousins, for most of history, cousin marriages was not a weird thing at all.
But God didn't say it was all right until after the time of Moses.
Didn't say what was all right?
Or God said that you couldn't marry your family.
Yeah, but cousins was never included in that, ever. There were rules about marrying your father-in-law, your mother-in-law, you know what I mean? Like close, I mean, if the other one died. What?
Jewish law for marriage. You shall not, anyone next to, close in kin, which it would be your father, your mother, your siblings, first cousins as well.
Okay. I don't know. I don't remember.
You don't, they didn't do cousins, you could marry your cousin.
Yeah. No, we don't do that now. But my point is that this was not a weird arrangement for them. That was marrying your cousin. That they did not consider this. This wasn't a weirdness in any way. Creon's son is engaged to Oedipus's daughter. Well, we find out in Antigone that Antigone is engaged to Creon's son. Did you catch that? Yeah, Haemon. Yes. And it wasn't anything that anybody considered weird. Okay. That's okay. You can feel that it is weird. It's all right. But for them, for this play, that's, ooh, that's creepy. He's going to marry his cousin? No, that's not. For them, this is not creepy. They wouldn't have said that. Creon gets a message that somebody has sprinkled dust, and I know you think that's a lame burial, but it was a good enough. With the right prayers and the sprinkling, the ceremonial sprinkling of some dust, it represented burial. She can't actually go get a shovel and bury him. She's going to get, it's going to take too long. But she can sneak up and do the ritual dust. And the sentry, the guards, have found it. And he says, the guards who were, and so this sentry comes on, and he's hilarious because he just talks, he just won't shut up, He just talks and talks and talks, he gabs and gabs, and I was so worried, like, oh, and they made me come, and oh, it's always bad to give rulers bad news, but I'm just telling you, there was dust. I'm just telling you, please don't do it. And Oedipus, Creon says, still talking? You talk too much. A born nuisance. The sentry says, maybe so, but I never did this thing, so help me. Creon says, yes, you did. What's more, you squandered your life for silver. He thinks that the guards have buried him for pay. Hey, remember what Oedipus said about Creon at the beginning of Oedipus the King? Tiresias, you've been paid to say this. Creon, you're in his pay. People are being bribed to take over. Creon says the same thing. You did this for money, didn't you? And here's what the sentry answers back. Oh, it's terrible when the one who does the judging judges things all wrong. I feel like that's the theme song of the first play, when the one who does the judging judges all things wrong. Creon has just joined the club, judging all things wrong. First, he made a bad law. Don't bury him. Second of all, he thinks people apparently are around him motivated by bribery and money, and it doesn't. I feel like the first thing that would occur to me would be someone who loves Polynices did this, not somebody did this for money. Does that maybe tell us more about Creon than it does about anything else, that he would jump to that conclusion, just like Oedipus jumps to the same conclusion? Yeah. All right, hang on. I'm following my flags. Let's read this. Antigone says this, line 499, 498. He said, did you do it? She says, of course I did. It wasn't Zeus, not in the least, who made this proclamation, not to me. Nor did that justice dwelling with the gods beneath the earth ordain such laws for men. Nor did I think your edict had such force that you, a mere mortal, could override the gods, the great unwritten, unshakable traditions. They are alive, not just today or yesterday. They live forever, from the first of time, and no one knows when they first saw the light. It's weird, because that's exactly, I'm going to take this in with my boys when we talk about the abolition of man. That's exactly what C.S. Lewis is talking about. There are unwritten traditions and rules that we all know since the beginning of time. And Antigone says this is one of them. You don't do this to your kin. In fact, C.S. Lewis mentions that love of kin and help and support of kin, the bonds of kinship. Every culture, everywhere, understands this. That blood binds you to someone, and you treat them in a certain way. Which goes along with the marriage taboos too. You treat them in a certain way, not this way, you treat them that way, when they fall into that category. But we all know that you do this. Antigone says, Zeus didn't make this law. You did, Creon, and I don't think you have the authority to make a law like that. Okay, so obviously she does it, and she is sentenced to death. They decide not to stone her or whatever the other was going to be. They put her in a cave, in a pit, and they cover it up, where she's going to starve to death eventually. I know, but they give her a little bit of food and water, long enough to live and be miserable for a while. But I know. But here is the rationale. Okay, I don't agree with this. Don't think. Whenever I'm defending them, please don't think, Mrs. Ferguson's think we should throw out babies. And no, the reason for throwing out the baby instead of killing it, and the reason for putting someone in a hole in the earth and giving them some food and water instead of killing them outright is you can claim you didn't do it. You're not tainted with the murder. You just brought a situation into play where natural causes would come about. If you put someone in a place where they can't get any food, they will die. But technically, you didn't kill them. I realize you did. I realize you did. And I'm sure this wouldn't hold up in court today. Like, I don't know, I just locked him in a room. And I looked in a month later and he was dead. I don't know what happened. This is not, no, you're going to prison. But the same thing, if you throw a baby out, well, you know, in this society, I suppose you got at least a 50% chance that somebody's going to pick them up and take them home, take them to the king's palace. But you can say natural causes did it, not you. I know, I'm sorry. I know it's not the greatest argument. Don't use this argument in your papers. Yes. Creon says this. Let me quote Creon here. 746, line 746. Whoever steps out of line, violates the laws, or presumes to hand out orders to his superiors, he'll win no praise from me. But that man the city places in authority, his orders must be obeyed, large and small, right and wrong. If I'm in charge, you will obey me. So this, I'm going to skip down on our questions. And I asked you what seems to keep Creon from being willing to change his mind. What did you put for that? I'm just curious. Why does Creon not change his mind? Is he maybe a control freak? Does he have control issues? It's true. His sister was the queen. You know, like that set up in the first play when he says, you know, well, I have all the good and none of the bad of being the ruling family, except you don't get to make the rules, do you? Unless you're the ruling family. Towards the end, I'm not going to tell you. It's towards the end, like I am telling you now, 12:30. But he says, it's hard giving up the heart's desire. They tell him you need to change your mind after all the bad stuff happens. And he says, but it's hard giving up the heart's desire. But I will do it. No more fighting a losing battle with necessity. Creon, like many of us, doesn't like to have to admit he was wrong and give up what he wants. I don't think he wants Antigone to die. I think he just wants to be obeyed, like you said. That's what I want. And it's hard to give that up. It's hard to go back and say, I was wrong and I am sorry. This is why, you know, Christianity brought a whole new ethic of strength. Because it takes great strength to do that, doesn't it? To humble yourself and say, you know what, you're right. I made a really bad decision. I'm going to change that. I'm sorry. Thank you for showing me another way to look at this. That is humiliating. And the higher you are in society or politics or whatever, the more authority you have over other people, the harder it is. to humble yourself and do that. Creon's just not ready to do that, is he? And it takes a lot. I mean, his son dies. You know, Antigone, he finally changes his mind. Makes the very unwise decision, I feel, to go bury Polynices before letting Antigone out. Did you not go let her out first? No, let's go take care of Polynices, then we'll let Antigone out. Well, guess what? Antigone decided not to wait to starve to death. And then Creon's son, in grief, has killed himself when he finds her dead. Tries to kill his dad. Dad goes home bringing the bodies, finds out his wife has killed herself. Their older son, Megarius, is mentioned in this. He died in the battle, the Eteocles-Polynices battle as well. Creon has now lost everybody. In line 1167, I asked you, Tiresias tells Creon that he's the one who's sick. Does this ring a bell? Yeah. Yeah, Tiresias said the same thing to Oedipus, didn't he? So, we already, I got to just mention this about Creon. This was the thing I was looking for earlier, and I spent so long looking for it, I might as well read it now. It's line 1151. Creon is so fixated in this play on keeping his own power, he's even willing to be blasphemous. And this, I guess, shouldn't surprise us because he's already made a law that is semi-blasphemous. He says this, "You'll never bury that body in the grave, not even if Zeus's eagles rip the corpse and wing their rotten pickings off to the throne of God. I don't care if eagles come and rip off bits of him and take him right to Olympus, and it offends the gods. Don't care. Not burying him." Yes, which is always a dangerous thing to say. You know, famously, all these stories are connected with each other. Famously, one of these 7 against Thebes, one of these kings that joined Polynices, Capaneus, he was climbing over one of the gates to get into Thebes, and he said something to the effect of, "No one can stop me now. I'm so powerful, and I dare you, Zeus," something to that effect. And Zeus, you know, lightninged him. And that's how Capaneus died. He didn't actually die in the battle. He just climbed up on the walls and taunted Zeus. And so this whole, you know, these stories are all bound together. You know, this other guy who was defying the gods as well. The last thing I asked you, actually, let me read the very end of the play, because it's just awesome. The chorus is talking, and they say, "Wisdom is by far the greatest part of joy, and reverence toward the gods must be safeguarded. The mighty words of the proud are paid in full with mighty blows of fate, and at long last those blows will teach us wisdom." This also reminds me of, you know, pride goeth before a fall. This is another biblical concept, isn't it? That wisdom and reverence for God go hand in hand. The fear of the Lord is the beginning of wisdom. And Creon ditched it. He did not fear the decrees of the gods. "I will make my own rules." And it came back on him until he suffers into wisdom also. These blows will teach us wisdom. I asked you, you know, the play is called Antigone, but Antigone dies about 2/3 of the way through the play. And if this is the tragedy of someone, and tragedy not Shakespeareanly, where we have a tragic flaw, but just Aristotelian tragedy, where bad things happen and you watch them happen, and they could happen to a person just like you who's made an error of judgment. Is this the tragedy of Antigone, or is it the tragedy of Creon? Yeah. And this is the first one he wrote. This is the earliest one, interestingly. You know, Antigone devoted her whole life to taking care of family, one way or another. She gave her life for her family. And that, I don't know that I see that, it's not tragic, it's beautiful, but that she was, yeah, I don't know if I see her life as, it's tragic in a modern sense when we say, oh, that's too bad. But it's not tragic in the sense that bad things happened to her for no reason or as a result of her own errors. I agree with Antigone right down the line. She went with her father because he needed a caretaker. And she came back and she took care of her brother because that's what the gods demand of her. And she said, just whatever the punishment is, I'm ready, bring it on. And that's, I mean, we say, as even they would say, but we say that's a shame, that's too bad. It's a sad story of her life. But I don't know that it's a tragic, you know what I mean, in a classical sense. But Creon is just mistakes left, right, front and center. Yeah, he came down just like Oedipus. Came down because of their own, it is terrible when the one who judges all things wrong, as the century says. We have a little bit of time left, and in that time, I want to introduce you. Oh, first of all, you have a paper. Now, do all of you feel like you are, I think that you are, oh, let me wait for Alex to come back in. No, I was just getting ready to say paper. We have a paper. We're going to spend 2 weeks on a paper. That is not code for don't do anything this week. Just, I feel like I need to remind you of that. And do all of you feel like you are completely understanding and competent enough when I say we're doing one of the 6-paragraph essays on a should someone have done something? Are we good with that? You know, the outline is in the back. I'm getting good material from you guys. I don't think anybody's having trouble with that. I just don't want somebody, like if there was somebody new to the class this year, I mean, you're new to this high school, but you've done stuff like this before. I just want to make sure everybody knows and I don't just cast you adrift, like throw you in the pool and say, swim. So that's what we're going to do. And you have 2 weeks to do it, yes? Okay, and it is, should Antigone have disobeyed Creon? Should Antigone have disobeyed Creon? Did she do the right thing? And that's it. That's all. I'm not going to, we've discussed it, and you guys know what to do. Work your magic. I am not giving you a summa to write this week. You can just devote your time for 2 weeks to this paper. There's going to be no other writing for these 2 weeks. For next week also, you are only reading one play. I am giving you guys a little breather, because you know what? After we read this last play, we're hitting our second big history book of the year. Now, it is not as long as the Histories by Herodotus. And it is not, Thucydides does not have the habit of all over the place. He is, in this year, we did this, and this. You know, and it's not as boring as that sounds. Some of it can be a little dry. But this is a history of the Peloponnesian War. And that's the next thing we're going to do. So it's going to require a little more of you, okay? Like a little more time, a little larger volume. So we're kind of having a little, you know, I mean, you're not doing any work, I realize, but we're kind of easing the reading load and the workload a little bit, because then we're going to do another wave. It's like interval training for your brain. Yes. It is. And I'm going to give you an intro to that next week. But what I want to do, if you turn to page 75 in your reading guide, I have a little outline. And if you don't, I'm going to read it. You can look at it later. Euripides is our final, are you guys with me? Euripides is our final playwright. We did Aeschylus. And Aeschylus is the generation, you know, Aeschylus fought at the Battle of Salamis. Aeschylus probably fought at Marathon. No, I guess it's the other way. He fought at Marathon, he probably fought at Salamis. Anyway, he fought the Persians. And he was the yay raw, Athens is awesome generation, right? We took on Persia. very patriotic. Sophocles is kind of the next generation. He's the conservative generation. It's like, we have something great. Let's not lose it. Let's follow the traditions of the fathers and everything. By the time Euripides comes on the scene, Athens is being torn apart. Greece is being torn apart. Athens has become greedy and oppressive and an empire. I'm sorry. I'm going to fill that in next week, okay? But the point is, Euripides has more of a cynical bent about him. Do you know what I mean? He grows up in a world, or he's writing in a world where things aren't so rosy. And that Athens that he learned about from his parents, yeah, it's gone. There aren't people of moral high standards in Athens anymore. It's all money. It's all, and so Euripides is that young, cynical generation. Does that make sense? And so I want the play we're reading is Medea, the witch lady that Jason brought home with Jason of Argonaut's fame, brought home with him to, and she just, I should give you I don't know how much you remember about Jason the Argonauts. I'm sorry, I'm going to keep you just a few minutes, but I'll give you plenty of time to eat lunch, I promise. So, you know, Jason had to go with his friends to get the golden fleece for reasons that I'm not going to go into. And so Medea is the daughter of the king, Euripides, the king of Colchis, and his sister is Circe. Medea is Circe's niece. And she's got the Circe thing going. You know, she can wave her wand and turn people into whatever. She's a sorceress. And she uses her powers to help Jason get the fleece and runs off with him. Yes?
I wonder if these stories are built off some kind of truth. Were there actually magicians back?
I am sure, well, Egypt had magicians because Moses did a little contest with them, didn't he? And we don't know how they did it. Whether they used some powers, whether they used like David Copperfield's sleight of hand. You know, I don't think David Copperfield actually has evil powers. Sorry. I'll be surprised if it comes out that he actually does. Medea came home with Jason, and then Jason was having trouble getting his throne turned over to him. The old man who had taken his throne wouldn't give it up. So you might remember Medea tricks his daughters. He says to the king's daughters, "Oh, isn't it sad your dad's so old? Wouldn't it be nice if he was young again? And look what I can do." And she takes an old ram and she cuts it, kills it, and cuts it up and puts it in a pot and does her herbs and incantations, and out jumps this lamb. She gives it youth. And just, the daughters, that's awesome. Well, here's the herbs. Good luck. Your dad's gonna love being young again. Yeah, and she did not give them the right herbs or the right incantation. They just killed their dad. So rather than giving Jason the throne because of this, they drive them out. Jason gets driven out of his home because of Medea. So when this play opens, he has already been somewhat disenchanted with Medea. All right? Medea has already done nefarious deeds. And they get to their new home, and Jason has fallen in love with the king's daughter. And he's trying to explain to Medea how it's all for the best if he leaves her and marries the new one. It will be security for all of them, for Jason, Medea, and their children. They have children. I'm going to leave it at that, okay? But no, you read it. So Euripides wrote 80 plays. We have 18 of them. We have more of his plays than Sophocles or Aeschylus. He first competed in 455 in the theatrical contest. Won first prize in 441, won 5 times. According to Aristotle, he was the most tragic of the poets. In other words, he could elicit fear and pity better. And he had his downfall was he loved the deus ex machina. He loved having a god come at the end and just show up on the ramparts and say, "We are going to fix all of this. You go there, there, everybody's happy." Instead of them working it out themselves. He liked to do that. A lot of his plays do that. He used common people as principal characters. Not just a messenger coming on, but actually a main character. It's just some farmer some yokel. And he used common language. He had those people come on and speak. And it says Aristophanes, a comic poet, said he makes all his characters speak like human beings. They just come on and they talk. Aristotle said Sophocles said that he drew men as they ought to be and Euripides as they were. That cynical attitude, right? This is the real deal. So I want you to read Medea. Now, also look in your reading guide. So if you look after Medea, there are a couple of pages of text, all right? There are no questions accompanying it. It is an excerpt from Aristotle's Poetics. And I said, read the following excerpt. We will discuss portions together in class. If anything, like as you read, if anything seems interesting or it has to do with a play that we've read, get a marker out or a highlight or a pen and just circle it. Or this is your book, you can write all over it and mark it. Or if he says anything and you say, yeah, just like they did in that play that we read. That's exactly what he did in that play. Mark it. Put a little star by it so we can talk about it next week, okay? So you're starting your paper, you're reading Medea, that's our last play, and you're going to read that couple of pages from Aristotle, all right? And I will see you hopefully you guys who are watching on video, hopefully I'll see you next week. Get well, everybody who's not well.